for being here. Appreciate you coming. I'd like to make a few remarks, and then I'll turn it over to the Speaker of the House. Primarily, I'm here to say thank you. Thank you to the Speaker and the Senate President for staying at the table for the last 8 months so we could work together in a collaborative fashion to put forward to the people a bill that will allow us finally to take action on the state of our roads and bridges. And I have to say, at a time when you look at Congress and you look at other politicians, it's not always the case that politicians can get together and actually get things done. And this is a case where we've done that, and I hope the people of Rhode Island see that we're working for them to move Rhode Island forward. And I'm deeply grateful to both of you for your partnership. We all know Rhode Island has the worst roads and bridges in the country, 50 out of 50, and we can't afford the politics of procrastination anymore. We have to invest more, and it's time that we have a sustainable funding stream to fix our roads and bridges. The proposal before us allows us to move quickly to repair our roads and bridges and put Rhode Islanders back to work immediately without raising taxes on families or small businesses. Now, fortunately, at the end of the last year, the federal government passed a new spending bill. On account of the new federal funding, we've been able to strengthen the proposal. We've lowered the maximum toll amount and put a cap on the tolls. We've decreased the number of gantries, and we've significantly reduced the state's interest payments. And as a result, this is a stronger proposal than it was, and thank you to Congress for taking action. I look forward to continuing to working with the House and the Senate in the weeks to come to pass this legislation, put our state on firmer footing, and put people back to work. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Speaker Mattiello, and again, thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, Governor. I'm actually going to start exactly as the Governor did. The Governor started by thanking me, and I'm going to start by thanking the Governor. I said as early as that day that we stood under the overpass that was held up by wooden pylons and rusting away, that I applauded the Governor for taking the initiative to finally address our decaying roadways and bridges. And I've always said that the Governor's been dynamic and attacked a serious issue in a meaningful way. I had concerns upon collaborating with the public that the proposal wasn't ready for prime time, that it could have some unintended consequences. In collaboration with the Governor and the Senate President, we studied it, we looked at economic impact analysis, I've talked to economists, and I've come to the conclusion that all of the professional analysis leads us to the conclusion that this proposal, one, fixes our roadways, infrastructure, bridges, and overpasses, and number two, just as important, is good for our economy. It's going to create jobs, it's going to put people to work, raise the gross product of Rhode Islanders, raise the wealth of Rhode Islanders, and move our state in the right direction. You cannot be a state that has the worst infrastructure in the country and have a robust economy. We do the best we can, but we will be much more successful once we shore up our bridges, our overpasses, and our infrastructure. Our businesses demand it. Companies looking at Rhode Island will demand it and require it, and we are not going to be last anymore. So I applaud the Governor. I thank the Senate President. They've been great partners, and I think the product that we are going to put before the House and the Senate are, in fact, good for our infrastructure, good for the economy, and good for the people of the state of Rhode Island. So thank you.
I, too, want to thank the Governor and Speaker for continuing to work on this very critical need. The one thing that's become clear over the months of debate and discussion is that most Rhode Islanders agree we need to invest in our roads and bridges. This is a good plan to address a challenge that's faced not only here in Rhode Island, but across the country. But as with others, the other people that need to be thanked are our federal delegation. U.S. Senators Whitehouse and Reed, Congressman Cicilline and Langevin. The passage of the federal highway funding in December has enabled the development of a new road work plan that does not rely on revenue bonds and dramatically reduces borrowing. This plan expressly prohibits the extension of tolls to passenger vehicles. Why is that important? It is important because the public told us it's important. And this is a concern and a fear which we all heard and has been addressed in the legislation. That is really the summary of my thoughts. I think the experts are going to actually delve into the numbers. But what I would say without hesitation is it's one of those moments when it demonstrates that by working together and collaborating together, we may disagree along the way how to get there, but when we share a common vision, we share a common goal, that we can resolve our differences and reach consensus. In this case, our goal has consistently been, since the day the governor was sworn in and the speaker and I, to move the economy forward. As long as our bridges are 50th in the nation, businesses are not going to come to our state. For that reason, I'm proud to stand here today and support this new plan.
We're happy to answer any questions, and we have Director Alviti here for technical questions.
A couple of details here. How many gantries are you going to be able to give us the locations of those gantries? And then the next question will be the broader one. By the time, if I understand it, there's a new Garvey bond, there's a refinancing of old Garvey bonds, there's toll revenue. When you put all of this together, how much additional money are you going to raise annually or over time for bridge repair? And how many bridges are you going to repair with that additional?
Great. So,
That's all
I'm glad he's here.
That's all you, Peter.
So let me start in reverse order. In terms of course, you understand that the roadworks program is more than just bridges. It's bridges, roads, drainage, transit. It folds in our entire transportation system. It's a program that will get us to have a world-class infrastructure at the end of 10 years. But the bridges, of course, are of central importance because they pose a very risky and safety kind of problem. So there are currently 150 structurally deficient bridges that this program will bring into sufficiency. In addition, there's another 500 bridges over the 10-year period that are not quite structurally deficient yet, but that would become structurally deficient if we didn't give them the attention that they need. And those bridges will also be fixed as part of this program. I expect that the entire program, in addition to our existing funding, that is the traditional funding that came to DOT, will be increased on the order of $258 million over the 10-year period, or above existing funding levels. The tolling component of that will provide us with about $45 million a year in revenue. We expect that there will be 14 tolling locations according to our still preliminary design of the tolling gantries, and we released locations that our engineering studies currently show to be most feasible for those gantries to be at. And I think you have a copy of that from last week or the week before.
It's a longer list. You have the list of the locations?
There is a map with 14 gantry locations on it, yes. So now, those 14 gantries, some of them will fund multiple nearby bridges to them. So the number of bridges that are associated with those, maybe what you're referring to is longer than the list of 14 gantries. But right now, we see the need for 14 locations that will fund associated bridge contracts fully.
And can you just help me understand this a little bit better? 258 million additional available bridge repair, if I understood.
For the program.
Okay,
Yes.
the last proposal was going to be a $600 million bond, of which 500 is for construction, and I think 400 and 500 is going to go to 610. Can you give it, and now you're talking about 150 bridges. So I'm trying to reconcile that. With this additional money, how many actual bridges do you think you can work on that you otherwise wouldn't be able to work on?
Well, actually, the roadworks plan, which is a plan that is comprised, as I said before, not only of bridges, but a lot of other moving parts that we have to operate and maintain and reconstruct, will bring us to a state of structural sufficiency in a 10-year period that would otherwise, under the existing funding scenario, possibly never happen, and with some extreme measures might happen about 17 years later than what we'll accomplish with this plan. By 2025, we will have the bridges in this state to less than 10% structurally deficient.
Do you have an actual list of the bridges you expect to work on?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, that's a great question, because the entire roadworks program, both with the constrained funding and the roadworks funding, we published on our website and submitted a couple of months ago as a 10-year plan that will be funded by the roadworks in this revenue stream that we're proposing here. And that is before the statewide planning council, and it's already into the public hearing process. I understand that we're getting a very, I would say, positive response to that. It's a 10-year plan that identifies every project that we're going to do, the date that it's going to be done, and the description of the work that's going to be done on each one of those bridges, each one of those roads, each one of those drainage projects. So far, just a couple of months into the public comment process, we have received back requests, in addition to the 10-year plan projects that we propose, requests for another $600 million worth of projects from the local cities and towns, which over the next few months, so you can see that, understand this, the roadworks program is still very much a state of good repair kind of program. It's an austere program. We're not looking to expand our capacity or make improvements to the amount of traffic that we are able to process. This is simply a program to put our infrastructure from a state of poor repair, which is a safety hazard, into one that is in a good state of repair.
Can I stop? I got lost at a very basic point, which is you started off with $500 million in additional money for construction, and now we're moving to $258 million additional dollars for construction, and yet you're talking about a plan that was in the works months ago that's before a committee. So that's where I'm trying to reconcile what it is. I mean, you can't be doing as many bridges with 258 as you were doing with 500. So help me understand.
Yes, during that period of time, we have received through the federal grants that were approved by Congress recently, an additional $20 to $30 million per year in funding. That provides us the additional funding that we have been able to modify the program that we were originally proposing by.
So does that make the gap between last year's roadworks and this year's roadworks?
Yes, we will be able to fund and execute exactly, for example, the same bridge program that we were proposing back then with this. In the same way, with accelerated projects, with a surge at the first 5 years in order to be able to address many of the structurally deficient bridges. We will be able to deliver that same program.
And if the math is $258 million additional from this project, 102 additional from the federal highway money, so that
The federal highway money will bring in an additional over $200 million worth of funding over 10 years at $20 to $30 million a year.
Because this is only 5.
I think some of the analyses that will provide it do the first 5 years, but the Roadworks program is a 10-year program.
So maybe what Peter should do is create a chart and get it to you, but that would, I think, make this easier for everybody. So can you do that, please? But you make a point that I want to emphasize, which relates to how we got here today. We sat down and said, okay, we want to do the same scope of work. We've all been committed to saying, let's do the same scope of work. Let's not raise taxes. Let's have a sustainable funding stream. Let's create thousands of jobs. Now, let's get to work and do the math to figure out what's the most efficient, effective way to make that happen. This stream from the federal government, this stream from the tolls, et cetera, to do that same scope of work. And that's how we have landed at what we have. And Peter can get to you a simple graph to lay that out.
So you'll give us the dollars.
Sure.
How do you reach the same level of dollars?
Yes.
How many bridges? And if you haven't listed the bridges,
Yes.
and that would be great. And your gantry locations.
Yes.
Director, could you explain how you're going to separate cars from trucks with this gantry equipment? How will it be able to pick out a truck or a car?
Okay. So the gantry system that we are proposing will be a completely automated system. It has both radar and visual recognition electronics associated with it, and Easy Pass. Most of the vehicles passing through that will be tolled are identified by their Easy Pass identifier. And that Easy Pass identifier certainly also relays the information in terms of what class vehicle that they are. But in addition to that, the radar sensors and the visual sensors will further refine the analysis so that only Class 8 and above vehicles will be tolled.
Are there any incentives for the local trucking industry to compensate them?
There's none in this legislation that are directly related to local vehicles. However, the legislation does provide relief for frequent users.
So that's a change, right?
Say that
The
again?
Senate version.
I think it was in the Senate version. We had a maximum one-time charge each way in the Senate version, and that's in this version. And we had a cap, which is $40 in any way.
Set of incentives that were added to the
Those are
Senate.
based in direct grants.
The incentives are not part of this legislation. That's correct.
So what is your, it does provide relief for frequent users. What's the relief that's
One time per day for the gantry.
Oh, the cap.
Okay.
Are we still doing the government financing as before?
Well, before you had a revenue bond, now it's Garvey financing. It was $500+ million. Now it's $300 million.
The other of the previous Garvey bonds.
Oh yeah, there's a refinancing of those, and I think that'll yield about $120 million.
But that was in the original bill as well.
Yes.
And we reduced, through the first 2 hearings, the governor amended the original bill and included some Garvey financing and reduced the original toll-back revenue amount. What happens now is you'll see, when you see the chart, instead of having toll-back bonds, the tolls revenue figures in over the 10-year period. And that is the revenue, I think, the shortfall that you're actually looking at, Kathy, you're asking about.
Because I think there's 2 Garvey moves going on here.
That's correct. There's
Financing
2.
some old bonds to save $120 million, which you're going to put into your program. Then you're going to issue, or somebody,
With the
and I'm a
new
little
federal money.
confused, who's going to float the bonds, and is it going to be private people like all of us who buy them, or are you borrowing the money from the federal government? What's the mechanism?
I don't want to get into the technicalities, but maybe just a simple way for you all to think about this. So there's the $120 million of Garvey refinancing, same as it's always been. There's a toll, which is now capped at a smaller number and smaller. Previously, we were going to do a bond, backstopped, if you will, by the toll revenue. Now, because the federal government has given us so much more federal money, we can do what's called a Garvey bond, backstopped, if you will, by that extra federal money. So instead of doing a revenue bond reliant upon the toll revenue, we're doing a Garvey bond in the same way this state has done it for 10 plus years, leveraging the new federal money.
Understood.
And the taxpayers are not, there is no recourse to the taxpayer, as there never has been in Rhode Island, for the Garvey bond. So that's maybe a simple way.
From? Is it from the federal government, or are you selling a bond? Commerce Corporation sells a bond to the public. They provide the money, but the only guarantee is from receiving the federal highway.
Exactly.
Does Commerce sell it or RIPA?
I believe that the Garvey bond is through the Commerce Corporation.
Whatever it is, it's the way the state's always done it.
Yes.
I have a question for Speaker Mattiello. This thing's gotten beat up pretty bad politically over the last year. The Senate President showed she had the votes for a year ago, but are you concerned about getting it across the floor?
No, well, I appreciate the question, but I'm going to disagree with the premise. I don't think it's gotten beat up. I believe that the average Rhode Islander wants safe roadways, safe bridges, a vibrant economy, and they want to move our state forward. They want us to do it in a way that best serves their interest. And I think the average Rhode Islander is a little bit concerned about tolls being expanded from very large Class 8 trucks to cars. My belief is that if there's any concern at all, it's simply that. And we've taken every measure that I think you reasonably can take to dissuade that belief and to reassure folks that this is a toll on large trucks, very consistent with the way they do it up and down the entire eastern seaboard, except for maybe Georgia, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. I've been told that there's an agreement in Connecticut between the Senate President, the Speaker, and the Governor that Connecticut's going to be tolling cars and trucks as of next year or in the near future. So, to get back to your original question, in the House of Representatives, I believe there's overwhelming support. The House has always moved economic initiatives. We've tried to stick to our mantra of jobs in the economy. I believe this enhances our job structure and our position and our economic climate. As I've indicated, you cannot have a robust economy with the worst infrastructure in the country. I mean, you're just an outlier. You stand out, and we have to address that. So, I want to commend the Governor, the Senate President, Director Alviti, our staffs, everybody involved, because the common goal has been to address the state need in such a way that best serves the interest of our taxpayers without imposing too much burden on our taxpayers. This imposes virtually no burden on our taxpayers. And, to the extent that moving goods from one state to another is an extremely expensive thing to do. The investment in the trucks, the fuels, the property taxes, the driver, it's an expensive thing to do. So there's transportation cost in cost of goods sold. The tolling from one state to another, I believe, is irrelevant. But to the extent that some folks think it is, well, that means that Rhode Islanders are contributing to the infrastructure of every other state that the trucks pay tolls in, except Rhode Island. This equalizes the formula and brings out-of-state money into Rhode Island. So it's the best approach for Rhode Islanders. It's the best way to deal with our infrastructure needs, and it's been analyzed with an economic impact study, and the professional data shows this is best for our citizens. So I believe our citizens are going to be in support of it once they actually get the facts and don't listen to the rhetoric of trucks today, cars tomorrow, which is a disservice to our people. I don't know what else to say. I've said as long as I'm Speaker, no tolls on cars. We've put in the bill that if you want to expand to cars, you have to go to a public vote. And, there's no intent to do that. Our intent is to fix our infrastructure, improve our economy, and move our state forward. So anyone that says anything other than that, ask them what they're basing their opinion on.
Just a follow-up, do you have a date for when it'll go to House Finance?
Very soon. We've been studying this over the summer. Originally, I wanted to have a fall session, only because it's important to the state, and I think it's something that we have to move. The governor is giving her state of state next week and proposing her budget. I believe it's on Tuesday. So we're going to be doing a lot of things at the same time, but we are going to concentrate on the budget as soon as possible. We've thoroughly vetted this. We've had conversations with the public. The Senate had a hearing on a similar bill last year. So we're going to... and I think we had a hearing. I'm not sure if we did last year or not. We did. So we're gonna hear it next week, and I'd like to vote it out on the House floor before we go to break, so that when we come back, all of our attention will be on this year's budget.
What do you say to the people who, I saw it on Twitter immediately yesterday, that if you were serious about giving, the voters veto power over extensions of cars, you put it in the Constitution, or let the people put it in the Constitution? Why not do that and remove that last iota of concern?
Because, first of all, this is a pressing need. It's time sensitive. It costs us a lot more money to get through the next election in terms of neglect to our infrastructure. Second of all, it's our job. Our job is to move the economy forward. I think it's our responsibility to do the things that our community needs. I think it's irresponsible to change the Constitution every time there's the slightest of issues. The reason we put this in the bill is because it's a concern that people have, and we're trying to reassure them of what their true intent is. And once that right is given in the legislation, almost impossible to take away. I wouldn't want to be the guy who tries to propose the legislation to take that right away from the people. So it's a real right we're giving the people, and it deals with it in a more appropriate way than changing our founding document. I mean, tolls are very important, our infrastructure is very important, but quite frankly, it's too de minimis of an issue to change your Constitution over. That's a sacred document, and you don't change it over issues.
We're going to hear a lot in the next couple of days from the truckers, from the P3 people, from the people who believe, the Republicans mostly, that we can just keep dollars around in the budget. So do you want to address all the people who think there's another way you should be doing it?
Well, relative to the dollars in the budget, we're going to hold that hearing the same time as we're going to hold the hearing on the governor's proposal. So let the folks listen to both hearings and judge which one is most appropriate. I mean, we'll look at the individual items and we'll see if the math makes sense, if the math adds up, and if it's a proposal that's actually sustainable. I've looked at it. I don't believe it's anywhere near sustainable. And if that's, we do that approach today. I would say for everyone that's advocating for that approach, we know where that leads us. We do that approach today. And it leads us to having the 50th worst, the number one worst bridges in the country. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. It's not realistic. But we'll vet it in committee and we'll give it a thorough hearing, and the public can see why it doesn't work, where it doesn't work. So.
Explain the justification for lowering the cross-state cap to $20, and does that reflect the concern? I mean, did you believe the idea that trucks would avoid the state because of the toll? Does that affect it at all?
There is diversion in, but actually, I asked this question of Director Alviti, and he gave a great example to current diversion.
All right, and I want to answer that for 1 second, but he'll give you the better answer.
He gives it.
But
we've all asked that same question.
I'm going to give you the lawyer's perspective answer, because I practice at our ITT once in a while. Trucks, when we had the weight restriction in Pawtucket, trucks would go over that, not to waste time taking 295, and they routinely paid $1,000 fines not to reroute through 295. So I think that's our best example of why they won't reroute. Fuel is very expensive, time is very expensive, trucks are all GPS now, they can't drive faster than they're allowed to drive. So time being an issue, they're not going to take routes that are inefficient. That's my experience as a lawyer, just having represented some of them that went over the Pawtucket Bridge with the weight restriction. And it's not that hard to divert through 295 when you're in Rhode Island. That little bit of a diversion they refuse to do at great expense. So I think the avoidance and the diversion issue is an issue that we have to take into account. It's in the bill, but it's not as real an issue as some people suggest.
Also, one of the tasks is to make sure that we're competitive. We want to keep Rhode Island competitive.
Exactly.
We want to have Rhode Island be a place where businesses want to be, they compete. And right now we're an outlier among states that we don't have any tolls of any kind. Now, except for Connecticut, we're the only state from Maryland to Maine that doesn't have a truck toll. So that is another thing that we looked at. As we sat down and we said, what do we want to do? We want a sustainable funding stream. We want to fix these roads and bridges. We need enough money to do it. We don't want to tax small businesses and people. And we want to be competitive. And that's what this proposal does.
How are you going to prevent trucks from getting off? From getting off the highway at the local roads? Are you going to bar trucks from local roads?
Well, first of all, let's see what happens. I don't know what the director has in mind, but if it becomes a problem, you could put weight limits. It's illegal to avoid, federally it's illegal to avoid tolls. Police know how to police that and monitor that. So if it becomes a problem on certain roads, then we'll address it. But quite frankly, I don't believe they're going to make the effort to get off a main highway to go to a secondary road, burn up all the time and all the fuel that would require. I mean, of course they're going to suggest they're going to do that because tolls are a cost. Fuel in the gas tank is a cost. Everything's a cost. Everybody wants the lowest possible cost. We all have self-interest. This plan apportions the cost in a fair way to industries that, quite frankly, are very successful and profitable. So it's the fair way to do it. It's the fair way for our taxpayers, but they're not going to increase their cost to an unreasonable limit just to get off a highway. And I would suggest that getting off the main highway to the secondary road actually will increase costs.
The question on timetable for this, assuming approval of this, how soon could you start construction? Then also you mentioned by the year 2025 there would still be 10% structurally deficient bridges. So can you tell us in the surge how many, what do you end up with? What would that percentage be after 5 years?
They're all good questions. So we designed the roadworks program to get us back into a structurally sufficient, or at least 10% structurally deficient category with regard to our bridges. Similarly in roads and in other parts of our infrastructure, drainage, etc. The beauty of the plan, particularly with regard to the tolls, is that dependable, reliable, predictable, and dedicated funding mechanism for transportation purposes only is going to be there even after this roadworks program to take care of that additional 10% structurally deficient, to take care of the proper operation and maintenance of the investment that we actually do make during these next 10 years, and a myriad of other transportation projects that we'll have need for at that time.
Right, I see that going ahead, but what about right now? If you get this, approved, the legislation is approved, you sell the bonds, when would you start?
We're ready to start. As a matter of fact, we have 4 contracts that will be going out the day after the bill is signed by the governor.
Contracts for what?
Director, could you just take us through a scenario of what it would be like for a truck to put out Rhode Island and go through these tolls, and how much it would cost? A single truck, one truck, how much is it going to cost?
So I think one misconception out there is you hear mention of $20, $40, all these numbers. The fact is the average toll that a truck will pay under any one of the gantries is $3. It's a $3 toll, which means, as the speaker was saying, the probability of a truck going off the highway onto a secondary road to avoid a $3 toll, get back on the highway, only to encounter another toll several miles down the road that they'd have to get off the highway again, avoid that, and get back on for $3, would be the equivalent, for example, of driving through Rhode Island and from, let's say, your entry on 95 into the state from Connecticut into Westerly, all the way up to leaving the state in Attleboro in the north, would be a $20 cumulative toll that someone would pay, a truck would pay along that whole way. The alternate to try and avoid the several tolling locations would be the difference between, for example, taking Route 1 Post Road from South County all the way to Massachusetts in the north, as opposed to driving on Route 95. So you can just imagine the additional time and fuel that would be expended taking that circuitous route as opposed to the direct route. So, as the speaker said, the probability of that happening from a business standpoint, the business decision will be made to stay on the highway.
For contracts with whom to do what? Have they already been advertised, and are they unpaid?
No, they have not been advertised because we wouldn't be so bold as to advertise contracts that will be funded by roadworks before we have the bill. But we have the procurement in place and ready to be advertised for engineering on consultants for the toll design, the tolling gantry design and equipment design. And we've already started the procurement process for the various consulting groups for bridge, roadway, and others that will be advertised. That will set us up. Who are going to get the contracts? I don't know. Whoever the proposers are and the best proposals that come in will get, the most qualified companies will get the work. And we expect that to begin immediately after the proposal process.
So what is the time frame looking like?
I don't think
That's not what I asked.
Yes.
So the second group of consultants to design the work on the
That's
bridges,
correct.
or have you already designed it in-house?
Well, there are some that we've already designed. Some of the bridges that we'll be doing will be starting this spring, the construction of. Okay, so we'll put out those construction projects to begin construction this spring on many of the bridges. The design consultants for the gantries and other bridge projects in year 2, 3, and 4 that we will start designing this year so that we're ready to execute in the following years are the ones that I'm talking about ready to go out right now.
But the question is, what's the time frame? So if you're looking to put these contracts out as an RFP, is there a straight deadline? What's the consideration period for when you put these contracts out?
So the design contracts and the construction contracts will be out over the entire 10-year period.
Now, I meant for the review for putting out a bid. What's the time frame looking like once you decide to put these out?
Well, it depends on which one. For example, the task orders that we're putting out for various bridge and road designs are qualifications where we will qualify consultant companies that are capable of doing the design of the bridges and roads that will be in place for us to issue task orders on the various projects we have over the next 2 years. And that'll repeat itself every couple of years.